Today, we are going to cover the top 5 mistakes that beginner cannabis growers make and how to avoid them. Hey, but before we do, today's video is brought to you by Real Growers Recharge. If you want stronger, healthier plants, if you want bigger roots for better fruits, you gotta check out Real Growers Recharge. It's like an instant compost tea that holds more nutrients at your root zone, breaks those nutrients down, and makes them more plant available, getting more of your nutrients into your plants. Find out more about Recharge over at realgrowers.com. And while you're there, use coupon code Scotty420 to get 20% off your first order. Now let's get back to the show. Come on, High C, let's do this. You're a beginner grower. Would you consider yourself a beginner grower?
I'm beginner to intermediate, but these are everything that we're going to go over today is pain points that I definitely dealt with getting started.
All right, come on. We're going to get you to harvest, brother.
Okay. Well, you've already got me to harvest, but for the new growers out there, this is going to be a valuable resource.
Yes.
All right, so let's start with what is the number one, this one I made too. What's the number one most common mistake new growers make?
If you didn't make this one, you're not growing, okay? Every beginner grower overwaters. Overwatering would be the number one mistake. And it's easy to do. What do we know? Plants like water, right? It's about all. Sometimes people don't know that plants need food. You know, so yeah. So when a plant looks bad, what do we do?
Well, I saw my plant was looking droopy and a little run down, and I was like, oh, it must need more water.
Right.
And I overwatered it and drowned it and killed it.
Yeah, it's a very easy way to kill it, too. What'd you say? You drowned it.
Yeah.
Drowning's a pretty quick way to die, man. Yeah. The plant has roots. Those roots need air around them. There's aerobic bacteria. You know, shout out to Recharge. But there's aerobic bacteria that is covering those roots. If that bacteria is flooded and drowned and dies, then there's no nutrient exchange going. Those roots are going to get stagnant and they're going to die. Okay, so
now, looking back, I know that one sign of overwatering is your plants kind of look droopy. They look like they look like they're being waterboarded, basically.
Yeah.
What are some other ways to do a quick test and see if I'm overwatering my plants?
This makes me happy because I can really help you get good at this quick. And you just pick up the container. Start when you have that solo cup. Your solo cup with your little seedling in there. Know what it feels like, completely saturated, and then pick it up. And then wait. And, you know, if it's a cupping cup, you can actually see the roots develop. But pick it up, and you'll be able to see that when it goes borderline too dry, is when it really starts growing. I mean, have you ever gone away for the weekend, had plants that you forgot to water? When you come home, they're just exploding with growth? Yeah, that's because all that aerobic activity got to happen in the soil. So they need air as much as they need water.
Okay, so one method is top watering. I saturate it. I water it till it's kind of running out the bottom.
Yep, till runoff.
And then you're saying let it dry back a little bit before I water it again.
A lot. Let it dry back at least half. And then go in there. You know, we're learning here. If we're new growers, we're learning. Pick the containers up. 3-gallon container or something like that. And say, hey, wait, that's not. And by the way, if it's not losing water weight, you know, you got a problem with your plant metabolism, right? If your container is staying wet for 5 or 6 days, you know, that plant's not moving a bunch of water.
Gotcha. Okay, so let's do some tips on watering real quick.
Sure.
I know you have a media of choice that you use because of the air. Explain it to me why you love cocoa.
Because it holds a lot of air even when it's completely saturated with water. And that's cocoa coir. That's basically the husks of the coconut. When they're making your coconut water, they're taking those coconut husks and they're airy. You can see that, man. If you just feel coconut husk, it's airy. So yeah, that's the idea with that. Whether you're using coconut coir, whether you're using peat and perlite. Perlite is that little popcorn looking stuff, you know, white popcorn looking stuff that's just meant to hold air. So the idea is you want, especially for our favorite plants, I don't know if we're saying the plant on this show yet, man, but if for that, they want a nice, light, well aerated soil.
Okay. And then the game changer for me, so that I don't even really have to worry about watering. You introduced me to sip buckets.
Sip buckets, sub-irrigated planter. They're just buckets where you keep a little bit of water in the bottom. I made real buckets. After 10 years of trying everybody else's, I made some. But that water wicks up through capillary action. Cocoa does it the best. I mean, cocoa really just wicks and holds a lot of air in there, so it's excellent. Just having a light soil, whether you're doing sip buckets or just regular feeding, lighten up your soil for cannabis. Yeah, I guess we are saying it.
The combination sip buckets plus cocoa eliminates like 90% of the watering.
You don't have to worry about watering anymore. Yes.
Okay. Biggest problem number 2 that new growers run into:
lighting. They make the mistake of lighting. First off, you know what? They over-prioritize lighting as the world's most important thing, more important than strain, more important than watering and food. Lighting is really important. Light is the energy. So getting it right is the difference between, a good harvest and a bad harvest.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so real quick, just to break it down for newbies, lighting in nature versus lighting in your grow tent, and how that works for veg and for bloom.
Sure. Well, let's think about these plants during the summer. They grow big. They've got those long days. It didn't get dark till 9 o'clock yesterday here. So they're able to grow. They call that the vegetative stage. So they're growing just like a plant would grow. And then once fall hits, and for us indoors, once the days become 12 hours and the nights become 12 hours, we call that 12-12, then the plants will start to flower up. They'll start to bud up, and all that vegetative growth will turn into flower.
So 18 hours during veg?
You know what? Anything more than 18 hours during veg, and there's actually controversy about 18 hours or 24 hours in veg. Mm-hmm. It's nice to let these plants sleep, but they don't need to. The type of plants that cannabis is, they don't need to sleep. So it really has to do with how much light you're giving them. If you're giving them a crazy amount of light and they get all the light they need in 18 hours a day, then turn the lights off.
Okay, and I want to talk real quick. Well, before that, the flipping, the switching.
Yeah. When
the days get shorter, that triggers the plant to start going into bloom. So that's kind of what we're mimicking by cutting back to 12-12.
Absolutely. Okay. Absolutely.
And lights in particular, I'm going to ask you this. Some people are going to say we're shilling. This is not from any of our sponsors. But if I'm asking you which lights should I go get, I want an actual recommendation. Who do you recommend shopping lights from?
I have HLG lights right there that have lasted me for years, and I have AC Infinity lights right here that have lasted me for years. So those are the two that I'll vouch for.
Okay, perfect. All right, let's jump to common mistake new growers make, number 3.
Okay, let's do it. This is nutrients. Poor nutrient management. Just like we talked about lights, it's not super difficult. You just have to understand the basics of it and manage them correctly. It's the same with nutrients. You just need to know the basics.
Okay, so I know that during veg and during bloom, I need slightly different nutrients. Can you help me out with that?
Yeah, N, P, and K, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. Nitrogen, when I think of nitrogen, I think of green growth. I think of lawn fertilizer or something like that. That high first number means I'm going for lots of green growth. Phosphorus and potassium, they're needed throughout the growth cycle, but less nitrogen and a higher ratio of phosphorus and potassium are needed in flowering. So in vegetative, when we're growing the plant, we want a higher percentage of nitrogen or ratio of nitrogen. Once we go to flowering or bloom period, we want lower nitrogen ratio. We still need it in there because that's what is responsible for keeping them plants green, but we want more of a ratio of phosphorus and potassium.
And I know GrowDots kind of does that work for you. You add it once, it gives the right nitrogen for the first part, and then cuts back a little bit for the second part.
Yes.
But a lot of the nutrient companies have made it really easy to get this right.
Yeah, I mean, I'm used to General Hydroponics 3-part. There's Canna 2-part out there, and you're just mixing, for the classic ones are a grow, micro, and bloom. So it's 3, you just do some basic math. It's 3 measuring cups full of chemical, and it is very easy.
Okay. And we kind of covered the NPK, the macronutrients.
Macronutrients,
But then you just said micro.
Yeah, there's three different. I can break this down. We're in the elevator, right? We're floor one. Hey, there's macronutrients, N, P, and K. Those are used in the main amounts. That's your main building blocks of plant material, plus carbon. And then there's things like, I'm thinking sulfur, I'm thinking calcium and magnesium. Those are secondary nutrients. They're used, and you need a decent amount of them. But they're not used nearly as much as the macronutrients. And then there's trace elements or trace nutrients or micronutrients. Those are things that are used in the teeniest, tiniest amounts, a fraction of a parts per million in some cases, or 10 or 20 parts per million in some cases. And those are really, those are necessary. They're almost like your vitamins, right? You take a little bit of zinc. You don't need a lot of zinc, but you need a little bit.
Okay. And common mistakes if I do screw up. I've seen some feeding schedules that intimidate the heck out of me.
Sure.
And I could easily see myself screwing them up. What are some of the things that happen if you screw up your feeding schedule?
And this one is very common, and it is you'll burn your plants, and it's very common because the nutrient companies want you to use nutrients. So they're going to tell you, hey, look, here's what you want to use. Use it every day if your plants will handle it. But your plants can't handle it, So too much nutrient is a big deal. You can your plants will show you signs before they really flip out, and that is, you'll see most of the time it's a burnt tip. You'll see a plant leaf; it'll kind of be like folding down a little bit, and then you'll see the leaf tip will be burnt. And if you see a burnt leaf tip, you go, "Hey, man, that's too much nutrient."
And then just back off for a couple
back
days?
off the nutrient. If you're using liquid nutrients, don't, just give it a day or two.
Okay. Common mistake growers make, number 4.
Number 4. Wow, man. Are you triggering me here, sir?
I know this is one that you do get triggered by.
Not monitoring pH levels. And this is one that I'm glad you put this on there, because I'm always sitting there saying, oh, don't worry about pH. pH isn't important. That's wrong. I'm oversimplifying it there. pH is important. I found a way where I don't have to worry about it, though. But pH is huge. But the potential of hydrogen, it's this scale. And I'm trying to think, like, for our purposes, I want to say, like, our meters go, like, I think down to right around 4. Mm-hmm. It goes down to, I think, hydrochloric acid is 1. And I can't remember what it is, like 8 or something like that. But there's something that's really high on the alkalinity scale.
So more acidic, the lower the number,
yep.
More alkaline, the higher the number.
Yeah. And the idea is that nutrients can only be absorbed at specific pH ranges. I'm thinking of my stomach. My stomach is all, not right. I get the acid stomach or something. It's not absorbing nutrients correctly, So all of us, me or the plant, we need a specific pH range to absorb nutrient at.
And what is that for most of the nutrients the plant needs?
Anywhere between 5-ish and almost to 7.
Okay.
And there's a range.
And that's where most of the nutrients can be absorbed by the plant. Now, you mentioned if you're trying to absorb food, you really only need to worry about what's going on in your stomach.
Yeah, that's where the big thing that I've learned. I used to have a pH doser, monitor, controller, bottles of pH up, pH down, was always checking the pH. And then what I figured out is the pH that is in my container doesn't really matter. The pH of the soil that is touching the roots in that rhizosphere where that root meets the soil, that's where I really have to be concerned about pH.
And you say stop worrying about pH because you figured out a way to keep that pH relatively in that zone. How do you do that?
Yeah, it's a shameless plug for Recharge, because once I started using soil microbes are able to create their own pH field around them. So if you have billions or trillions and trillions of soil microbes, they colonize to the root zone. They're actually looking to get sugars from the root. It's an exchange, and then the microbes are exchanging nutrients. So they want to make that transaction happen. So, hey, I'm sorry, I can't do it. The pH isn't right. Hey, let me make the pH right for you. Come on, we'll make a deal happen. That's what the microbes are able to do. They're able to control their own pH, and it's neat. That's how they get all those nutrients.
So even if my soil is a little bit off, if I'm using some good soil microbes, they're at the root zone where the transaction happens, and they're regulating and making sure that the pH level right at the root zone is right.
Yes. So worry about your pH, but worry about it at the root zone. Worry about it in the rhizosphere where the root meets the soil. That's the only place that you have to worry about the pH.
All right, and fifth most common, and this one is probably going to be a pain point for a lot of people. What's the fifth most common mistake new growers make?
Man, this is my fake smile right here. Ignoring pests and diseases. I thought they were trichomes, Scotty. Yeah, I've had that happen before. I came back from a vacation one time, and the plants said, hey, how's everything going? Great. They're really frosting up. It was whiteflies. They were frosting up with whiteflies.
Not trichomes.
Not trichomes. And I have a feeling it was like the denial thing, you know. But yeah, bugs will, absolutely destroy your harvest. So you gotta, it's IPM is what they call it, integrated pest management. And it's not prevention, it's management. So you've got to act like you've either got pests or they're coming, and you've got to manage them. So that has to do with the environment, has to do with temperature and humidity and air circulation and all that kind of stuff, as well as keeping the room clean. There's a lot to it, but just don't stick your head in the sand and be like, I hope I don't get pests ever. I hope I don't get pests ever. Make sure you're doing things that even if you had pests would mitigate them.
All right, and some of the most common pests, I immediately think of spider mites because that's the one I've heard about the most.
Yeah.
What are some other pests and I guess other problems that IPM helps address?
First off, spider mites are a good one. They're definitely very common. You'll see little pinholes, little white pinholes, kind of, little spots. It's called stippling, and that tells you got spider mites. And when you have that, if you have them in vegetative, get rid of them. You can spray them with horticultural oils. You have to break their life cycle, which is, I think, a 7-day life cycle. So you got to every 3 days be spraying. And come on, man, you get on the internet and you learn some stuff, I wasn't born knowing what a spider mite's life cycle was. I Googled it one day.
What about some of the other pests?
I tell you what, this one's not so bad, but fungus gnats. If you see fungus gnats, that usually means some cultural practice of yours is off. Fungus gnats come when the top of the soil is staying too wet. So if you've got that, think about how you can change your irrigation tactics, whether it's with drippers, whether it's irrigating a little more deeply, less often, or using bottom wick buckets or sip buckets rather. But because what'll happen, they vector more pathogens. So they're very common. You'll see them. You'll be like, it's no big deal. They don't do anything. But all of a sudden there's other bugs showing up,
Okay. And then besides bugs, what are some of the other things that IPM helps regulate, get rid of, etc.? Yeah,
molds and mildews. The dude up in British Columbia, he's got bud rot he'll get. And that's just this mold, and you got these giant buds, and a mold will grow in the middle of it. There is powdery mildew, which is really difficult to get rid of once you have it. But it's just this little white mildew on your flowers and that kind of stuff. And keeping a clean grow room, and I hate to say this because I do it and it's so much fun to do, but not taking cuts from your friends. That's the way you keep your room clean.
And one thing that you taught me was pruning.
Yes.
Explain why pruning helps with avoiding bugs and mildew and stuff.
Yeah, they're looking for a good environment, a nice, just like us, man. They're looking for a nice, peaceful place to chill, all right? Like between two leaves, or there's not too much wind or light going on. So we want to have as unfavorable of an environment for these plants for these bugs as we possibly can. So avoiding, nice and shady spots, or where there's a leaf laying on another, where some spores won't have to worry about getting blown by the fan, that kind of stuff. So we want to make it just unpleasant. So we want to unpleasant for the bugs. So we want to trim off, all the bottom stuff, and we want to make sure we're getting airflow through there. We want to make sure, it's crazy. I saw this chart one time about how much faster bugs grow in 90 degrees than 80 degrees and 70 degrees. It's exponentially, sir. I like to say that word, yeah.
So pruning for airflow, also keeping humidity, temperature in mind.
Yep.
Making it ideal for the plant, but not ideal for
bugs.
For bugs and for the molds and stuff.
Yep. Absolutely. Hey, but those are just my thoughts on the matter. Let me ask you, if you could give one tip to a new grower, what would it be? Let me know in the comments. And if you liked this video, please hit that like button, smash that subscribe button, share it with another grower you know, and check out another couple videos YouTube's recommending. I hope you'll dig them.